Hi, it's just Rusty here again, and today I'm going to take a look at the White Mountains. Have you ever wanted to hike through the White Mountains on the Appalachian Trail, maybe going from end to end, but felt a little intimidated by their reputation? Well, if that's you, you're not alone because I was the same way. So today, I'm going to take a look at the White Mountains huts, lodges, and hostels that you can use to help you get through. Well, the White Mountains, from Mount Musalaki over to the Maine New Hampshire line, has a reputation of being one of the most difficult stretches of trail on the entire Appalachian Trail. And it's a well-deserved reputation. There's several 5,000 footers, near 5,000 footers, and of course the granddaddy of them all is Mount Washington, which is well over 6,000 feet. For somebody who wants to be out on the trail every night, maybe a hardcore hiker, considering using the hut system to get through the White Mountains is maybe a non-starter. And there's other reasons other than ego that it's actually a non-starter for a through hiker. But for those of us who are more casual hikers, and I was a more casual hiker at the time I was tackling the White Mountains, using the hut system just makes the trip not only easier, but in many ways much more enjoyable for the, I don't want to say casual hiker, but say for the hiker who doesn't have the opportunity to have 1,500 miles under their belt before they actually hit the White Mountains in order to get prepared to go through them. So the hut system, there are 8 huts throughout the White Mountains, pretty close to the Appalachian Trail in all cases. They're spaced about a day's hike apart on the trail. Now, you do have to check online for the current details. I'm going to tell you what my experience was. I believe it was in 2019 and in 2017. So my experience is a couple years old, 3 years old now, because it's 2022 when I'm filming this. And things may have changed, especially with the cooties pandemic and all of that. But this is approximately what your experience would be like. They are expensive. It's $120 per person per night. And that's the AMC member price. It's actually more expensive for somebody who's not an AMC member. So if you're going to stay at more than one hut, it's actually worth paying the money to become a member and then getting the discount, which will pay for the membership and then a little bit more. And if you're going to be out there for multiple nights, I believe there's probably a multi-night discount. For that $120, you get a bunk, you get dinner, and you get breakfast. You don't get a shower. You don't get electricity. But these things are really remote, and they're a welcome respite from the trail, especially if you're going through them the way I went through them. So here's a picture of the Madison Springs Hut. I just picked this randomly. It's this is what they look like. I mean, they're all different designs, but they have large dining area for the guests and bunk rooms. Now, when I actually hiked through this section, I had to skip over the Lake of the Clouds hut. I should list the huts. There's a Lonesome Lake Hut. There's a Greenleaf Hut, Gale Head Hut, Zealand Hut. There's the Mitzpah Hut, the Lake of the Clouds, which is the most popular one. It's right up there, it's not at the summit, it's below the summit of Mount Washington. There's the Madison Springs Hut, and then there's the Carter Hut. And I actually couldn't stay at the Lake of the Clouds. There just were no reservations available, and I'll get to the pros and cons of the hut system and needing reservations. It's an obvious thing that you'd need, but it's also, there's a con there. So I had to go from the Mitzpah Springs Hut to the Madison Springs Hut, and that was a lengthy hike. And the person who took my reservations warned me and said, "You know what you're getting into. That's an awful long hike." So I took that as a fair warning, and I left right after breakfast at the first hut, and I didn't actually get into this hut until just before dinner, so it was a full, nearly 11-hour hike just to go that 11 miles. So that's how tough it was. So besides the huts, and I'm going to get back to the huts, but I just want to briefly describe the lodges and hostels. There are lodges and hostels on the way, and here's the four that I used. First, there's the Hiker's Welcome in Glencliff, New Hampshire. It's just trail south of Mount Moosilauke. It is the first hostel as you enter the White Mountains. It is a fantastic place. It's run by Packrat and Allison. They have a beautiful bunkhouse that they were actually building the first time I was there, and I did get to use it on subsequent trips. They do provide shuttle services, or at least did back then, and they will slack pack you over Mount Moosilauke, for example, which is what I ended up doing actually on a previous trip. There's the Highland Center at Crawford Notch. Now, this picture here is a view from the front door. I actually don't have a good picture of the Highland Center itself, but it's a more hotelish, full cafeteria sort of thing, electricity, showers. There are bunk rooms, so you won't have private quarters unless you reserve that, I guess. There's the Joe Dodge Lodge and Pinkham Notch. I don't have any pictures of that, but it's similar to Highland Center in facility, a little bit smaller. And then there's the Rattle River Hostel in Gorham. So that's, or Gorham, whatever. It's right after you get off the Presidential Range, and it essentially says you've kind of gotten at least through the White Mountains National Forest. It goes on into Maine a little bit, but you're beyond the hut system, I guess is the way I should have worded it. So there are pros and cons of staying in the huts. The pros, well, bunks and meals. So that means you can carry less. And when I say carry less, what I really mean is you can eat more, because the meals at the huts are much more than you're going to be able to prepare for yourself out on the trail. They do have running water for cleaning up, washing up, not showers, and sponge baths aren't allowed there. So you're going to be able to take care of basic sanitation, but you won't be able to take a shower, rinse the sweat off yourself, at least not at the hut. There is some limited resupply. As you can imagine, it's very expensive because they have no way of getting to the huts any better than the way you took, and that is to take a trail. And the crews there actually have to carry everything in and everything out. But there is some resupply there. And entertainment, they give you some local entertainment just to keep you, keep you excited. There is usually a library, a small library in each of these huts, so you have some reading material. But there is no electricity for the guests. They have small electric generators for emergency lighting, that sort of thing. They cook with gas. I think there's probably electricity for some of the refrigeration and things like that, but it's not available to you there. So you are roughing it, maybe not as much as out on the trail, but it's a nice facility. The cons, it is expensive. It's actually very expensive. You think of it as it's expensive for what you get, but when you consider what they have to go through to provide these services to you, I think it's a fair price. Really, you should be prepared to tip the crew. The crew is usually a bunch of college kids taking the summer at what I can only imagine is probably a very demanding and minimum paying job. And, just like any, like waiters, they actually probably depend on the tips to earn tuition money or whatever. So it's polite to be ready to tip the crew. You do need reservations, and the reason why I say this is a con, it means you have to be there the night you say you're going to be there, and that's what makes it unsuitable for a thru hiker, because the reservations you really have to make ahead of time, and a thru hiker really can't tell for sure when they'll be passing each of the huts. So that makes it not only unsuitable for thru hikers, but it actually puts you on a schedule as a section hiker. And you basically have to make it, or you're going to miss supper, or you're going to miss your chance to stay in a bunk. It may be a con for you that it's got community bunk rooms. If you value your privacy, you're really not going to get it. A couple of the huts do have 4 bunk rooms, rooms with 4 bunks in them. But that's the most privacy you get in any of them. In most cases, at least the 7 out of the 8 I stayed at, with the exception of those 2 that had 4 bunks in a room, usually there were 20, 30 bunks in a room. They were just big, open, like dormer type rooms. Now, if you're a thru hiker, that doesn't mean you can't stop at the huts. You probably should for rest and relaxation. If there's any emergency supplies you do need to pick up a few trail bars or whatever it is. Just be prepared. You're going to have to pay, but that's just the cost of hiking through there. So the lodges and hostels have their own set of pros and cons. The pros for both are bunks and meals. With neither of them, I don't think anyway, is the meal included with the price of the stay, but meals are available, if not at the hostel itself, at least at a local restaurant. Showers, that's always a bonus. And the reason the showers are available at the lodges and not the huts is the lodges are down in the valleys. They are basically full service, electricity and all that sort of thing, establishments. There is resupply opportunities, a little bit cheaper than what you can get at the huts. And if it's not available at a hostel, at least there is usually a resupply run to the local town and the local stores like Walmart's or Dollar Generals or whatever's out there. By entertainment, I mean, the hostels usually at least have a large collection of DVDs, so, you can pop in your favorite movie if you want to sit back, if you've been out on the trail for quite a while and you just want to give your brain a break. At the hostels, at least, usually there's no reservations needed. It's nice to call ahead, as you get within range. Call on your cell phone and find out if there's any bunks available. And depending on the time of year, there's usually not a problem. They can be used for hiker drop sites, so you can mail stuff to yourself and they will hold it for you. There's no fee usually if you're actually staying at the hostel. If you're just walking by the hostel and picking up something, usually there's a small fee for them holding your materials for you. And of course, the hostels are actually suitable for thru hikers. They're made for thru hikers and section hikers, though I have used the Hiker's Welcome for day hikes. Some of the cons, at least for the lodges, is the expense if you're on a budget, the way a thru hiker typically would be. They are cheaper than the huts, but it's a hit on your wallet if you're trying to get by on a thru hiker's budget. At the lodges, I believe you do need reservations. I suppose there's actually a possibility that there would be free bunks and you could get one without a reservation. You actually could at the huts in theory, and I'm actually going to go over that in a moment. And again, I found at least at the 2 lodges I stayed at, there were the bunk rooms, but they were the 4 people to a bunk. So if it wasn't a crowded weekend, you were actually very likely to get your own bunk room, or at least if you were with a traveling companion, maybe the 2 of you would be in a bunk room that had 4 bunks and the other 2 would be unused. Okay, so there's a story of contrast. I'm just going to give you my experience going through the first half of the hut system. But first, I'll tell you how I actually got through them. I started out at the Hiker's Welcome, and here's their main entry room where all the DVDs are, and a bunch of hikers gathered around just enjoying talking. Now, I had already been over Mount Musalaki at a prior trip, so I actually took the shuttle over to, I think it's called Kinsman Notch. And we being my son and I, did have to stay out on the trail one day, over one night before we actually hit the hut system. And then we got to the first hut, which was Lonesome Lake Hut. And then, I don't have a picture of the Greenleaf Hut, but this was a picture taken shortly after, the next day, where we had joined another hiker, Logan. He's now known as Crusher, but he didn't have a trail name at the time. And then we went to the Greenleaf Hut, and then finally to the Zealand Hut, and then from there we actually went down to the Highland Center and picked up our rides and went home. So here I'd like to talk about just what it was, just give you a little vignettes of what it was like. The Lonesome Lake Hut, my son and I arrived literally on July 4th, now, and it was a weekend, so we would have expected that it had just been crowded, every bunk taken. And even the crew was surprised. It just so happened, probably a 1 in a million chance, there were only 4 of us. I think they had a capacity of 32, but there were only 4 of us there. So we got, really nice individualized attention from the crew. Craig and I met Nikki D, I think was one of the hikers, and Logan, or Crusher, was the other one. And it was a pretty good time. We had been rained on, and we were able to leave our boots out for those to dry, and it was just an interesting, pleasant experience. Well, we had to get to the Greenleaf Hut for the next day, and that meant climbing up Franconia Ridge and over several peaks, Mount Lincoln and Mount Lafayette. And when Craig and I were going over Mount Lafayette, it started to hail. So here we are, stuck in a hailstorm, well above tree line, absolutely open everywhere. And we could finally, when we got to the peak, we could actually see the hut well below us. And okay, good, we're going to climb down to the hut, which means the next morning we're going to have to climb right back up this half-mile climb. But we got down there, and at that point we weren't hiking with Crusher yet, and we actually got kind of worried about him. And he turned out he was about a half hour behind us. And by the time he got up to Mount Lafayette, it was lightning. He was caught in a lightning storm that came up really, really fast, just like the hail came up on us really fast. And when you're caught out there, there is absolutely no cover on Mount Lafayette. I suppose you could scramble under a rock, but he just hightailed it down and came into the Greenleaf Hut like a drowned rat. Now that evening, I was in my bunk, and there was a maybe 11-year-old, 12-year-old in the bunk next to me. And this kid was just rustling through his backpack all night. I don't know what he was looking for, but it was really kind of annoying. There's a lights out rule at 8:30, 9 o'clock, and if you're going to be making noise or you need to be reading or something, they tell you to please leave the bunk rooms and go to the common area. And, with your headlamp, do whatever you're going to do. Well, this kid just would not quiet down. And I was getting really annoyed. And even his mother, she was in the bunk below him, and she's saying, "Jimmy, knock it off. Stop." So finally, he stops rustling around in his backpack, and I hear him say, "Hey, Mom, can I have the map?" So she hands him the map. And I'm like, good, he's going to be quiet. He's going to be looking at the map. And then it starts. "Hey, Mom, did you know it's 0.5 miles to Mount Lafayette, and then it's a mile to Mount Lincoln?" And I'm like, "Kid," and she said, "Shh, Jimmy, be quiet. People are trying to sleep." Kid would just not shut up. Well, the next day, this is episode 3, when it was time to get up, little Jimmy was under his cover saying, "I don't want to get up. I'm tired. I'm comfortable here." And the parents, and I think they did the right thing because of the weather. The weather was still pretty nasty. They just canceled the rest of their trip. I guess they were just going to hike up to the top, take in the view. There wasn't going to be a view for them. And then go back down. You can actually get to the Greenleaf Hut from the highway below it. It's a side trail up there. So I thought that was karma, kids got to learn. And then the next day, we get to the Gale Head Hut. Now, I thought the Gale Head Hut was the most remote. I've read somewhere that the Madison Springs Hut is actually more remote, or at least more difficult to get to. But this was a remote hut out seemingly in the middle of nowhere. And this a different 12-year-old kid shows up with his parents, of course. He wasn't hiking alone. His pack was like half the size of his body. And I'll tell you, this kid had it together. He was respectful. He knew the rules. He participated in the environmental talks and contests and other things that were going on at the hut that night. And it was just a wonderful contrast to see that. So that was my experience going over the first half of the White Mountains. I'm not going to go through hut by hut the second half of the White Mountains, which I did a couple years later. That was the trip where I forgot all about putting sunblock on my legs. And I got second-degree burns because I was out above tree line all day going over the presidential range. And I did get through the hut system, but I had to stop that trip early because the burns just had to be treated. I had to go to a clinic. They said, my God, you can't hike like that. And I'm like, thank you. I've come 20 miles for you to tell me what I already knew. Just bandage me up, please. So one of the things that I often used to do just for fun is I would pretend like these adventures were movies, and I'd make up these movie posters. No matter how good or bad you think the experience is, they're great memories. And if you can look back at your hike through the White Mountains, through the hut system, and if you can't laugh at the experience, well, then maybe the little 11-year-old who couldn't keep quiet because he was just so excited to be out there isn't the one who's really got the problem. Thanks, and I'll see you next time.